Hi guys, and welcome back to ECAfrica Talks. We're so excited that you guys have been watching, listening, subscribing, and also commenting and letting us know who you want to see or any conversations that you want us to have with these entrepreneurs. We love this community and we hope that you guys will continue to grow with us. Today's conversation is one that I'm personally very excited for. It's someone that I've been tracking their journey for a while now, and I was introduced to through multiple people. So I'm very excited to have Ntsako with us today. I'm going to introduce you as best as I can, but It's a question I have for our guests anyway. But thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Your story is so dynamic and I feel like it's so multifaceted. You're a founder, you are a community builder, I want to say you're an influencer in the space because it's a space that you seem to know so much about. And so for our viewers, I always say that nobody can advocate for you as best as you can for yourself. Yeah. So can you give us a little snippet of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Perfect. You've already done an excellent job. So I think if I were to describe myself, I would say that first of all, I'm a venture builder. So what that means is that I help other people to build and scale their own companies. I'd also say I'm an ecosystem builder. So I'm really passionate about just developing the broader startup ecosystem in the country. Many people don't know it, but it's still a very young community. So just playing an active role to try and ensure that it could grow to become a version of Silicon Valley and what we know it to be today.
Right.
Obviously a contextually relevant version of it is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And then I also build my own tech startups. So that's something that I love doing. At any given moment, I'm usually building something. And that's just because there's just so many problems to try and solve. It gives me energy and it gives me life to work on them. And I'll also mention that I'm a husband as well.
Shout out.
Shout out. So I'm also a husband, and that's an important part of who I am. And if you were to sum me up, I would say that I'm somebody who's extremely passionate about technology and its ability to really solve problems and to make a change. And then equally super passionate about people and leadership. And those are like the main things that I think sum me up. And then of course my faith that underpins everything, and that's me.
That's so good. And I think I like how you've given us a holistic picture of what an entrepreneur and a venture builder could look like, because I think sometimes it's very dominated by a white-centric view of what an entrepreneur is. And I enjoyed listening to that. I enjoyed listening to the journey also of getting here, right? And that how you are the product of multiple things, which is very special.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So something that I'm always very interested in is, how did you get to this point? Why did you pick entrepreneurship? Why did you pick venture building when it is not volatile in South Africa, but it is a newer space?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And I think I have to go all the way back to the beginning, really. So one of the interesting things about me is that our family was one of the first in our community to get a TV. So very interesting. Back in the day, I don't know why my dad, thought that was a good idea, but it turned out to work out very well in my favor, because it really gave me an impression at a young age about, technology and its power to connect people. So because we were one of the first people would come to our house to see it. And I think that made a lasting impression on me. So that's the first thing I think is important to just mention. The second thing is that, growing up, whenever I wanted something, maybe the latest PlayStation or something, my dad would often say, I'll get it for you, but you're going to have to raise half the money. And I think that for me kind of sparked that entrepreneurial passion.
Right.
Because I had to think of businesses at a young age, how can I raise this money? So I tried everything growing up. I painted, I performed for the people in my complex. Nice. I washed cars. I did everything to just try and raise some money. And Shame, he's so kind. Whenever I would raise the money, he would say, don't worry about it, I'll buy it. You can use the money and buy games. And I think that's where the seeds of entrepreneurship were planted in me. And I knew at some point that, I will want to do something. I didn't know it was going to happen so young. So when I went to university, the University of Cape Town, where I studied, I didn't go in there thinking I'm going to go into entrepreneurship immediately after studying.
Okay.
So in a way, entrepreneurship was thrust upon me because while I was visiting my aunt, who stays in Witbank, her house got broken into.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the kind of the founding story of my first venture, Jonga. And while I was there, our house got broken into, and about 50,000 rands worth of goods were stolen. So she stays in the township. So if you can picture that, 50,000 rands worth of goods is everything of value. And yeah, I just remember that moment and just what an impact that event had on her life. And immediately that, set me off on this path of, okay, how do we use all this stuff that we're learning in this engineering degree to build a solution for the problem that she's experiencing? And that's pretty much when I decided, okay, you know what, I think I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship and I'm going to actively try and build a solution for this huge issue of crime that is so prevalent in low-income communities. And one thing led to another, and next thing I knew, I was graduating and going into this thing. And I haven't looked back ever since then. It's been one thing that leads to another.
What a beautiful story. And also, it shows that entrepreneurs at their core are solution builders, right? So we find problems and we pick a solution and you find another problem and another problem. I think that's also why you find that so many entrepreneurs who at their core are entrepreneurs have so many different ventures.
True.
Not because they're not focused, but because you're like, oh, I can fix that.
Exactly.
I can actually fix that. I know what the solution is. I can fix that. And so I always think it's very interesting to see the communities that we come from and the spaces that we come to, because what are the pain points for me might not be the pain points for somebody else. And because I understand those pain points, it's important for me to put my step forward and be like, hey, I know how to fix this.
Absolutely.
I know why it's important to fix this.
Absolutely.
Which I think it's very interesting. So you mentioned your university background. You have a engineering degree, but you also are a Mandela Rhodes fellow or scholar, which is, I'm always very excited when I meet one of you guys. I'm like, what do you do? Tell me about it. So can you talk me through the landscape of UCT, the Mandela Rhodes, because it is so different from Joburg, right? The startup space, the entrepreneurial space seems more dynamic. It seems like there are more funds there, or is that just a perception that we have in Joburg?
I always say, if you want to build something, Cape Town is probably a more conducive environment.
Okay.
But if you want to sell it, then Joburg is a better environment.
Okay.
So there's a lot of support within that ecosystem. Even within UCT, for instance, where we decided to start Jonga, that spun off because of a university challenge called UCT Upstarts. So I was brought on to that program by my co-founder at Jonga, who was studying finance, and we had another idea before we decided to work on Jonga. We had an idea to try and democratize solar in like low-income communities. And then obviously the event happened that I just explained, and then we realized that this is actually a more pressing problem. But, just the fact that there was a platform like that, that's ultimately what led to us pursuing this journey. And, I know that UCT has other, platforms now today. Like the students there are so lucky because they've got so much support,
right?
Which is incredible. And it's the same can be said for Stellenbosch, right? They have the launch lab and they have all these different things. So, I guess you could say that maybe they've caught on to this entrepreneurial whirlwind sooner.
Right.
But, having lived in Johannesburg now for about 4 years, it's really incredible to see how this ecosystem is also starting to grow and to become a force in its own right. So I would say today the gap is not too big.
Okay.
What I'm seeing is that in Joburg, you actually have a lot more founders, actually. Maybe not as much events just yet, but we're working on that.
Which you are, right? Which we'll get back into now. But you say that you build ventures, right? Or you come alongside different founders, people at different stages, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
What are some of the trends that you're seeing, especially in South Africa, when it comes to tech startups and tech as a whole? Because I think sometimes it feels like there's like this divide between entrepreneurship and tech
And
entrepreneurs,
tech entrepreneurship,
which
yeah.
I'm trying to also navigate and understand, because
Yeah.
it almost seems like those are one and the same to me.
Sure.
That everything should start integrating tech where possible. It doesn't need to take
Yeah.
over everything. But if you can make a payment system a little bit easier for an entrepreneur, why not
Absolutely.
use that?
Absolutely.
So what is some of the trends you're seeing?
Yeah. I think, first of all, let me just speak to that, the difference between an SME and a startup.
Right.
So for tech startups, fundamentally, they are built for hyper growth. So scale is the name of the game when it comes to startups. Whereas with an SME, you could just serve your immediate community, be like a local accounting firm, and you just serve businesses, and you're very happy with that. And that's a fantastic business. And in many ways, when people speak about how small businesses are the backbone of the country, they're speaking about that individual. So you do also get a subset of entrepreneurs who have got global ambitions, and they want to develop a solution that is able to scale globally. And typically that's kind of like a startup, or you can think of it as a high growth startup. So there are similarities, but there are also differences in terms of, one, the ambition, the level of ambition. And it's not to say one is better than the other. It's just that the one fundamentally has to grow massively to give outsized returns for investors, but also to impact lives all over the world. So it'll be difficult to scale an accounting firm globally, but with a tech business, you can do that, like Facebook, Airbnb, and so forth. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of what we're seeing in trends is that we're having a lot more people locally going to the startup side of things, which is really incredible to see, because what it shows you is that, we're starting to realize that in today's world, we can actually make an impact globally with the solutions that we have. So it's really incredible for me to see that and to be a part of it. But another thing that I'm seeing that I think sets us apart from the rest of the world, because in my job as a venture builder, I don't only speak to African founders, I also speak to European and American founders. And what I'm seeing makes us distinct is that we're actually trying to solve big problems.
Okay.
In the Western world, a lot of their problems have been solved, like the grassroots problems. So for them, it's like, how do we make things more efficient? But it's not like solving a fundamental human problem.
Right.
Whereas here on the continent, we have real problems. And what I'm seeing is that founders here are going after those problems, which is really inspirational to see. And also really fantastic in the sense that if they're able to solve them, then it fundamentally changes like millions of people's lives, but also their own lives.
Right. So the stakes feel a bit higher.
Exactly. But it's fantastic to see that, the ambition is there and the heart for these problems is there as well. And by my observation, I think, South African entrepreneurs are pound for pound incredible, among the best. And I think that has to do with the fact that, in our local environment and ecosystem, we have to jump over more hurdles.
Okay.
There are certain constraints that it turns out are actually a blessing in disguise in terms of helping us to become excellent entrepreneurs. So South African entrepreneurs, I find, are very resilient. I find they're very creative, because oftentimes you have to do more with less. I think it's an incredible gift in scarcity, is that it breeds creativity.
That's very interesting. And I think the perspective of saying, obviously you're seeing entrepreneurs from such different backgrounds. I think sometimes in South Africa, we can get down and out about stuff and be like, oh, well, we're going toe to toe with each other, but we're not competing globally. When in actual fact, the problems are so different and we can compete globally, which is a trend that we're seeing with almost everybody who's come out on our podcast in the past few weeks has said the same thing of the world is looking and the world is watching us. And now is our time.
Absolutely.
Which I think is such a good reminder to have, especially in an election year, to be like, guys, it's okay. We're doing good. We're doing good. And so I think that's really inspiring as well to hear. So can you talk me through being a venture builder, owning your own venture, and then starting Darkies in Tech? Because that just feels like an added, it just sounds like an added thing to your list. So can you tell me what Darkies in Tech is and why you wanted to start it? So I started Darkies in Tech in 2021.
from a place of frustration, really, just around how exclusionary the ecosystem was at that point. So in my own journey of building out Jonga, which was my first venture, it was quite challenging as a Black founder trying to navigate. At that point, we were living in Cape Town, and oftentimes we were privileged enough to get accepted into these prestigious programs, and we would go into that space, and we'd be the only Black founders in that space. And when we considered the quality of information that we were receiving, it made us feel extremely privileged, but at the same time it broke our hearts because we realized just how big the gap is between those that have access to this knowledge and those that don't. So for me, it was really about trying to ensure that whatever it is that I'm learning on my journey, I can democratize that to other founders that maybe don't have the level of access, maybe didn't study at a UCT, for instance, or a WITS, or these well-connected institutions. So it was one, solving for that, trying to ensure that we as Black founders are able to share knowledge. But then the other part of it was around trying to bridge the gap, because what I saw was that a lot of the excellent founders I knew were working in silos. So we were all doing fantastic things in our own right, but none of that was actually coming back into our own ecosystem. So I also saw an opportunity for us to come together so that we could strengthen one another, and make the journey a lot less lonely. Because a lot of the times the reason why startups fail or companies fail is because it just becomes very overwhelming.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. You're in it, and it feels like a very lonely journey. So through connecting people to other people who are going through the exact same thing, I felt would be quite a powerful thing. So what I did was that I literally just took 10 people who came to mind who fit this kind of profile that I also, I guess, fit. And I added us all into a WhatsApp group. And I said, okay, well, we're going to figure it out. Are we going to just sit here and complain, or are we going to think of solutions? Are we going to share knowledge? Right. And I'm glad to say, reflecting today, where we have about 400 or so odd members who are all doing incredible things on a daily basis, just freely sharing information, sharing opportunities. I would say that, it's really proven the experiment successful in that we're not complaining. We're actually trying to do something and trying to help one another. So that's really what we're trying to do with Darkies in Tech. We're not anti-white. We're not an angry crowd. We're just pro-Black. We're pro-connecting one another. We're pro-trying to lift ourselves up from the ground, and sharing knowledge like we know other communities do amongst ourselves, so that we can access the same level of opportunities. So it's really about trying to create a more equitable ecosystem where, as a Black founder or as a Black VC, you have access to the same opportunities. So in many ways, it's about just trying to reach the same mark and trying to bridge that initial gap that I saw in those spaces that we occupied, that often made me feel like, this gap is too large.
And it's not a dirty word, right? Yeah. It's not a bad thing to be pro-Black, to be for transformation. Absolutely. And I think it's the same thing that we champion here at ECAfrica. We say that we're for Black excellence. Absolutely. Not because we hate anybody else, but because for so long and currently we haven't been in the limelight. Exactly. We haven't had access to the same information. And so even being pro-Black, we're still playing catch up. We're not even tackling the biggest tasks yet. Exactly. And so I almost find it very insulting when people think that because you take a pro-Black stance or because you say you want Black excellence, that it comes off as this antagonizing, angry thing. And I think the reason I find it insulting is because you guys have done it for so long. Exactly. And so I'm confused as to why this is an issue. Exactly. When the spaces that you've created were never for us, and we're not allowed into those rooms anyway. Exactly. Creating your own table should be fine.
And that's why, I decided to call it Darkies in Tech, because I could have called it People of Color in Tech. I could have called it anything. But I thought, no, I want to be provocative in this way. I want to be unapologetic about it. We're very Afrocentric in everything that we do, and it's not a mistake. It's really just us stepping into our own power and saying, we also have a voice in the ecosystem. And, in the South African context, we're the majority.
Right.
So you can't have it in today's age where you have an ecosystem that's white male dominated in a society that is actually where they're the minority. So it's quite intentional. But in the same way, we're saying we want to be a part of the broader ecosystem. We want to interact with the broader ecosystem. We don't want to just necessarily be recluse in our own little corner. No, we want to have the conversation. We want to engage the ecosystem, and we're hoping that will ultimately drive change.
And you spoke about the democratization of information, right? And so to have these spaces that are dedicated to people who might not have had the information means that when we go pitch against everybody else, we're pitching at the same level. We're asking for the same money. We're able to sit in the same rooms.
Exactly.
Not because you want it to be this competitive thing, but that we're active participants in the economies that we're in.
Exactly.
And I think that it also just speaks to like the South Africa that we're in, right? It only works if we're all working together and if we're all contributing, because I think that there is knowledge that needs to be passed down, but there's also a way of creating solutions that you might not have thought about. So somebody sitting in Johannesburg, South Africa might have a really cool idea, but the funds are in Stellenbosch. And so how do I collaborate with you? How do I create a space where I'm also speaking to you as my equal? I'm advocating for myself. I know what information I don't know and I'm able to ask.
Exactly.
Which I've really found interesting as somebody who's attended a few of the Darkies and Tech events, is that every one of the founders seems to be so willing to share and to not hoard information, but to want the best for their co-founders, to want the best for the people around them. Is so genuinely interested in each other's ventures. And sometimes it's not even that you need funds or anything from each other. I just need a sounding board for somebody else to give me a different perspective, which I really respect. And everybody's quite young as well in Darkies and Tech, which is very inspiring as well. So Jonga is how old now?
So we started Jonga in 2016.
So what are some of the challenges that you've seen since then? Because that means that you're coming from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And so what are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, so sure, there's been so many challenges. First of all, Jonga is trying to do quite an ambitious thing, which is solving one of the most pressing challenges that the country has, which is crime. And particularly in low-income communities. And there's a very kind of specific focus on those communities because they are oftentimes underserved. In fact, they are always underserved. When you look at the private security industry, it's not fundamentally designed for our people. And we felt that, the policing alone, the policing system alone was inadequate. So we didn't seek to completely disrupt it, but we wanted to develop something that would work alongside them.
Right.
So that we could leverage and mobilize community when people need it the most. So just to kind of mention the solution, and then I'll get into the challenges. So what it is actually is it's a community-based alarm system. So it's a piece of hardware that you install in your home or your small business, and it links to an app. So when you set up your profile on your app, you say, this is who I am, and then you also add your neighbors onto your community contact list.
So accountability.
Exactly, for accountability. So if ever anything happens, it notifies you and it allows you to share that with your community. And then we also notify the local police and we send them your location and then they're able to respond. So it's a community-based solution. So, I mean, it's incredible in the fact that it then opens up security and takes it further than it's ever gone before. Because your traditional ADTs and stuff won't send vehicles there. But now, in essence, because we're leveraging and partnering with the community, people are able to protect one another. But, that comes with its own set of challenges. Right? So the first is that it really relies on the police to also do their job, to show up on the scene. Or otherwise it becomes a tough sell.
Right.
That, if something happens, somebody will actually come. And what we've seen is that some communities have been more adopting and more willing to come to the party from a policing standpoint, and others haven't. So those are some of the kind of systemic external factors that one has to deal with. Because at the end of the day, you're still wanting to deliver a value proposition, right? We're not giving them away for free, even though it's a lot more affordable than what's out there on the market. It's not free at the end of the day. So you really require the whole ecosystem to come together so that you can deliver your brand promise. So those are some of the issues that we've experienced. And then, of course, COVID as well, you have to speak about that. So we started in 2016, but we only really launched 2 weeks before lockdown.
Oh no.
Yeah, so you can imagine we had trained an agent network on the ground that was supposed to go door to door and sell the product.
And you can't leave your house.
And now we lost access to the home. So that was another story all on its own. And we had to pivot our go-to-market strategy, and we had to now figure out how do we get to the home without actually necessarily going there and knocking on doors. So that was quite a challenge. And, we were able to pivot our business model to partner with companies. And we were so lucky to partner with Coca-Cola at a time where they were looking to roll out an initiative to capacitate entrepreneurs in townships across the country with these Coke branded containers, like business containers, to run their businesses out of. And because those were usually in outlying areas, very rural, where traditional security systems couldn't work, our systems worked perfectly. Yeah, so it's a unique characteristic of our system is that it's wireless and it's battery powered, and it holds a charge for 8 months. So making it perfect for rural use cases where maybe you don't have access to electricity. So we found that unique benefit gave us that opportunity with Coca-Cola and took us everywhere. A blessing, but also a challenge.
Yeah.
In the sense that, we hadn't anticipated the challenges that would come with scale. So just because the alarm system works everywhere doesn't necessarily mean you should immediately scale everywhere.
Right.
So one of the things that we learned in hindsight was that it's far more powerful if you take a geographically kind of led approach to going to market and focusing on one community and really saturating it. In that way, everyone buys into the solution, and then everyone is willing to do something if someone's in trouble. So that did it led to some growing pains around having some units in that province, some in that province, and then you're having to manage that because it's actual physical products that you have to support, which is also quite a challenge. And then I think maybe the last challenge I'll speak to was, again, another impact of COVID on the supply chain.
Right.
So, we had to source components to build our product. And the reality is that, you compete with the likes of Apple for those components. And during lockdown, it was just incredibly difficult. So ultimately, all of these problems led to us deciding, I think in 2021, that it was probably best if we just took a step back and didn't focus on growth. So that was a difficult decision we had to make. And in essence, where we are today with that business is that we've decided that we're going to park it until a time where we have a bit more resources and we have a commercially viable partner, another partner like Coca-Cola, who can help us scale it. And then we're going to focus on scaling it once again.
Which I think is really important too. And I mean, it also speaks to your experience of knowing when to pull back and when to give your full self, because I think that is a tangible thing that entrepreneurs can only learn on the ball, right? Like you have to make the mistake, you have to fail, and you have to know. It's almost like baking, like you have to know when to pull and when to not. And so I think that speaks to such an important thing when we speak about entrepreneurs and their ventures, that they're not just going at it blindly. These are living, breathing aspects of them. And I always say, maybe it's because I study businesses, but I almost think of them as their own entities, as these living, breathing organisms that need to be tended to lovingly and gently, and sometimes they need to be put in a corner for a bit. I think that speaks to such an important part of being an entrepreneur, especially in South Africa, across the continent. I know that we spoke about the importance of reaching across the continent and having integration between all of us. So as we end, I have 2 questions for you. My first is something that I'm just personally very interested in. I think it's very nice to hear from our entrepreneurs of anybody who's on your radar, anybody that you think that we should be looking out for. If it's a podcast, a show, a venture, I just think that it's important to shine light on the entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, and who better to do that than other entrepreneurs. So,
oh man, do we have the whole day? Sure, there are so many incredible ventures. I mean, I mentioned that within the DIT ecosystem, we have about 400 or so odd members, and each of them are just doing incredible things. So I could literally go off all day just listing people to look out for. But I think today I'll choose some to mention. I think Jobbox is one incredible solution. The founder Boo Boo is doing fantastic work. And he's really trying to create opportunities for students, but also connecting them to opportunities to get experience, which is incredible. I also think Welo Health is another incredible one. Welo Health and Zoe Health. The founders are Tato and Zanele. And those are just two incredible medtech solutions that are really going to change the game. So really excited about what they're doing. There's so many that are coming to mind right now. But I think let me list two more.
Okay.
Another really great solution is one run by a founder named Mawetu, and it's called Fixer. So he's able to, in essence, send you a mechanic on demand to your location for a service or whatever it is that you need done. And I think that's just such a really cool solution, and he's doing a fantastic job there. And then, who will we give this last one to? I think I'll also give a shout out to DOV, who's been on this
who
this
we
platform.
had on the show. Yeah,
he's another incredible founder in our community, and him and I have been really working together quite a lot, just in terms of advising him and trying to help guide the journey. And already he was working on a fantastic solution, but he's also now pivoting to work on another solution as well, which is going to be almost like an operating system for churches, solving some of the pain points around communication, giving, and so forth. And that solution excites me, because church is such a big component of my life. So he's another excellent founder that I think is on a really awesome path.
Which is so interesting, because when DOV was on our show, he shouted you out. And so I think that it's so important for founders to celebrate each other. So I want to go look at some of those people that you've told us. I've used Dropbox before, so I always think it's very exciting when we have a venture and I'm like, oh, I know that one. So I'm going to go look up everybody else that you said as well, because you might as well, right? Just because you're shining doesn't mean somebody else is not shining at the same time.
Exactly.
My final question to you is, what is one piece of advice that you've given or you've been given that you think that young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs should know as they continue on this journey?
That's a very good question. I think the main thing that I would say is that, although the journey is challenging, the challenges don't all come at once, right? So that's a common fear that people have, is that, I can't go into this. There's too many challenges. There's peril. There's all of this. But the reality is that you only really ever face like one major problem at a time. And each time you solve that problem, you level up. You become better, and you become more capacitated and equipped for the next problem. So they don't all come at you at once. They're kind of, phased at different places along the journey. And I think having that kind of mental picture of problems that are kind of phased along a journey makes it seem more accomplishable.
Right.
It makes it seem more possible. I don't know. For me, it really helps to think of it in that way, because it makes me feel like, okay, cool. Like, yes, they do become progressively more challenging, but I'm also becoming progressively more competent, more able, more capable. And I really feel like that perspective might lead to more people deciding to do hard things more. Knowing that you're actually getting better every time. And that's probably the advice I'd give them, that they don't all come at once.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
So thank you for being on our show. Thank you to everybody who is listening and streaming and sharing. We so appreciate you. We are ECAfrica on everything. So please like, share, follow, do all the things. And Ntsako, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. So just Ntsako Mgiba. I've been posting quite consistently lately and just really trying to once again democratize all these learnings. But they can also find me on Instagram as well, Ntsako Mgiba.
Perfect. And if they want to join DIT?
Yeah, so if you want to join DIT, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll share the application with you. I am also working on a new website for it as well. So that's going to be incredible because then you can just go straight to the website.
Stunning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for being here. Thank you
you.
for being so generous with the information that
Yeah.
you shared with us. We're such fans of you and we are so lucky to have you in our ecosystem now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much and we'll see you guys next time.